closer. All the stars are closer. All the stars are closer. Maybe the night that my dreams might let me know. All the stars are closer.
Good morning. It is still morning, right? Yeah, 11:15, that's morning. Hi, friends. Oh my gosh, I have friends. Woo! If y'all could do this when I'm on the big stage, that'd be lovely. No, I'm kidding. So I have the honor of introducing our next speaker, currently the head of design transformation at Envision, where he works with their partners to weave together the best methodologies, practices, and tools into comprehensive, customized strategies that elevate the business impact of design within every company. He previously worked at McCann Erickson, Citi, and Starwood Hotels, building teams that created award-winning global advertising campaigns, multiple Fortune 100 brands, and innovative digital experiences. His work has received over 150 international awards. His app design has been named as one of the world's 100 greatest apps, and Apple has featured his work in 10 keynotes and more. He shares what he has learned through his speaking engagements and the Crazy One podcast, which is an in-depth exploration of issues that matter to creatives, including leadership, creativity, career development, innovation, and more. What is he most proud of? Carrying on his father's work by also becoming a creative director. What's he most excited about? His new role as the head of design transformation at Envision. But you know what? I have had the pleasure of getting to know, I'm going rogue. I have had the pleasure of getting to know Stephen Gates over the last year or so. And this I know, he's a force of nature. He's really, I know he's gonna kill me later. No, he really is truly an incredible, authentic human. And I am just thrilled. He's no holds barred. He is who he is. And you guys are going to learn a lot from him, but you're in the right session, I'll tell you that right now. So if I could just welcome to the stage my friend, well, he was my friend, no, Stephen Gates.
How the hell do you follow that? How's it going? There are a lot of people in here. It's always funny, I'm always amazed that design conferences are always in like the worst design rooms that we could like ever find. Like Amy said, my name is Steve Gates. The number one slide that you will love the most out of this entire presentation, I guarantee you will be the next one. And that is that you can download this entire presentation from my website. It's not my first rodeo, people. So you can go there, the PDF of this whole thing is up there, you can download it. I always love to give away everything that I'm teaching and working through, so go there to be able to do that. Like Amy said in the keynote, we're gonna do something a little bit different today. We're gonna do this in two parts. The first part is going to be this part, which is to be about a 45-minute talk where I'm going to share everything that I've learned over the past 13 years leading in-house design teams. The second part is that one of the things that I love to do is to rip up and to just kind of like disrupt process. And one of the things that I've realized doing a lot of these is that with these microphones that are positioned in the back of the room, it's always an interesting thing. You get to the Q&A, and then it's this kind of like odd rush of people to try to get to the microphone. Whenever they get there, sometimes they ask great questions, sometimes they ask not so great questions. But it's a format that doesn't work for a lot of people. So what I've discovered is whenever I do this talk, after I'm done, people come up and they're like, oh my God, that was great, it was like therapy. So the second part is going to be what I'm calling a therapy session. And what it is that I've actually done is that you are completely in control of this content. What you can do, shameless plug here, go to my Twitter feed, go to SD Gates. Whenever you get there, there will be a link to this page where you can submit and then vote on what are the questions that we're gonna answer. Because what I want to make sure is that we are answering the things that most of the people actually want to know about, not just who gets to the microphone first. Very new format. This is either going to be a great success or I'm going to be rethinking this later and apologizing to Amy. We'll figure out which one it's going to be. She's in the front row and that always terrifies me more than a little. So to expand on a little bit and explain kind of what Amy said in my intro. So I'm a second-generation creative director, and most people ask, what does that mean? What it means is that my education in design started when I was 2 years old. I've also done this enough to know that if you show yourself as a child, whenever you start a presentation, people like you more. But this is me standing on the feed tray of a 700-pound cast iron antique letterpress that sat in my parents' basement. My father and I would go down there at 2 years old. Having children handle lead type at 2 years old has to be a good idea. But what we would actually do is that we would go down there and we would write my storybooks, and then we would actually print them on the letterpress. This also basically made me a hipster by the time I was in kindergarten. Whenever I got to kindergarten, I had been self-publishing for years and did not understand why the other children had been buying books and really looked down on them for that. I was unaware that Brooklyn existed. But, so that went, and I worked in agencies all my life. And I had one client who changed my life, changed the course of my direction, sent me into in-house design. The client that I had was American Airlines. And American, obviously, at the time was the world's #1 airline, but the day that I had it on made the difference, because I had them as a client on this day. I had to work with them on September 12th to try to work with them as a brand and as a company to figure out what the hell do you do whenever something that horrific happens to a company. Spending the next several years trying to keep them out of bankruptcy, putting together a campaign that was both external for consumers but internal for the company. And that absolutely changed the course of my career. Because what it did is it really let me see that for me, building a brand was a much more interesting challenge than building an advertisement for a brand. So I, at that point, confused all of my friends and left the advertising world. And so for the past 13 years, have basically led 2 design teams. I spent 9 years building the global brand design team at Starwood Hotels and Resorts. Was an incredible ride. Whenever I got there, the team was basically making posters for the HR team that were like going up in the elevators. By the time we left, we were one of the most dominant teams that worked with Apple, Google, Facebook. We'd been in like 7 keynotes, you name it, we'd basically done it. Confused everyone again by then deciding to go to a bank because apparently I'm a masochist. And I was like, hey, you know what? There's this 210-year-old company. They want me to be the first head of design in the history of the company. That's got to be a good idea. Learned a lot there. But about a month ago, decided to leave. And what I did was I actually, during that time, started a real passion project of mine called The Crazy One. Because what it was that I realized was that I spent way too much of my career feeling like the outsider, feeling like I was doing something wrong, feeling like what the moves that I was making people didn't understand. I also felt like there are way too many things in this industry that we do not talk about. Too many important things that go unsaid. We are in a generation where we are comparing our insides to everybody else's outsides because of the perfection of social media, and quite candidly, that's bullshit. So what I wanted to do was to set off on a mission to try to help the industry figure out how do we get better? How do I give away everything that I've learned? So that then led to a very interesting discussion. I've known the CEO and the leadership at Envision for a really long time. And they came to me and they said, look, where do you feel like there's an opportunity right now? And I said, there is a huge amount of tools, a huge amount of information. There is nobody that is helping anybody put that together. So after a month of trying to argue over what the word would be, I'm now the new head of design transformation at Envision. It sounds dangerously like, thank you. I am beyond excited about this. And I think especially moments like this morning, whenever you see Nick Law speak, whenever in a lot of cases people will have one question whenever I went and did this, which was just simply like, what are you going to do? And it sounds lofty. But the entire goal of my group is the fact that right now we have a massive, massive opportunity and a massive challenge. How do we weave together the tools and information to make a real impact? The impact of design is just undeniable right now. But that is the entire mission of my group, to go in and work with companies to try to help them see the value of design, to try to turn around, coach their executives, coach their tech teams, their product teams, empower their design teams to really be more. That's the reason why. And I think as you look at Nick's talk this morning, the interface really has become the gateway to almost every consumer experience. That's why I decided, again, to leave in-house to go to a software company, because I feel like the opportunity to impact and help has never been greater. Because here's the thing. We are in a time where everyone in this room has the opportunity to make an impact on business that we have not seen since the Industrial Revolution. We have seen the pendulum swing the other way, that everybody understands that they want and need the value of design, especially at in-house teams. The problem that we're up against, the vast majority of them have not a clue of how to take advantage of this opportunity. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is I want to share what is really everything that I've learned about all these things. But we're going to start, and we're going to have a bit of a cathartic moment. We're going to have a bit of a bonding moment, even with this many people in the room. And what I want to do is I just want to do a quick poll. So I'm going to put a couple statements up on the screen. If you can identify with this statement, I want you to clap. Just that simple. Everybody make sense? Awake? Coffee still kicking in? We're still at the pre-lunch coma. I love you doing the Mr. Burns thing over there. That's awesome. Okay, first one. Your team is disrespected and underfunded in your company. Agencies are the only real thought leaders. I love that the more I do this, the applause for that one gets less. You are told to just simply make it pretty. Amazing how often that one comes up. You are given just solutions to simply color in. Your company is afraid of any type of change. So we're going to have a bonding moment over this right now. This is why this is going to be a therapy session later. Because the thing that I've seen is whenever, and I do look at the attendance of like, what are the companies that come here? The thing that you'll see is that the people sitting in this room range from like 1- and 2-person shops up to some of the biggest companies in the world. Yet oddly, we all still have the same problem. And that's what it is that we're up against, is how do we actually find and empower in-house design teams? So, this is the thing. Most companies love numbers. And so, one of the best ones that I've ever seen as we talk about why in-house design team matters is that there was a 10-year study that was done. And it was done with a number of what were considered to be the most design-driven companies in the world. The team that I had at Starwood was one of them, which is why I like this graph so much. And what they did was that they looked at, over that 10-year span, the performance of the S&P 500. And then they looked at these companies that invested in design, and they looked at how did they perform. A fascinating and completely, obvious thing happens. On average, the companies that invest in design performed about 219% better in their stock price than companies that did not. This is always like the most, I'll leave it, everybody else loves to photograph this, take it back, show it to your boss, tell them I told you so. But this is the thing, design has a business impact. And that's a big part of what we're going to talk about today. Because whenever we talk about this stuff, how do we empower design teams? Sounds like it should be simple, sounds like it should be easy, yet here we all are. And so the thing is that in my experience, if you want to change a team, if you want to change a company, a culture, anything else, it really boils down to focusing on just 3 things. I'm a big fan of 3s. It makes it much easier to remember. The 3 things that you need to focus on. First are the tools that you use. Obviously, that plays an important part in what this is. The second one are the norms that you establish. Meaning, what are the things that you are going to set as the benchmarks? What are the things that you're going to hold people to? What are the ways that you're going to try to affect culture inside of your company? And the last one is the space that you occupy. It makes a real difference whenever you actually look at the actual physical space that a team sits in. These are the 3 things that matter the most. Now, the reality is that the tools, we can talk about that ad nauseum, right? Like, there's a whole bunch of things there. The space you occupy, sorry, I can't help you with that. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus on the middle. And we're going to focus on 3 really important parts as we talk about the norms that you need to establish. Those are going to be understanding the value of your team, creativity, and culture, which are unfortunately also the 3 things that are usually the hardest to actually affect. So, the first one we want to talk about is value. Value is an interesting thing, because do you actually know and can you express the value of your team beyond your work? Because this is what I'll see in a lot of cases, that design teams, whenever I'll say, what's your value? We're going to hit a deadline. Our work looks really good. The problem is that neither one of those are things that the company you sit in actually sees as valuable. So, let's talk about this a little bit more, because most companies, they don't understand creative teams. They don't understand our value. So the thing that we have to do is to show it to them, and to do it in terms that they actually understand. And this is the thing, is that too often, the value of your team is defined by the company that surrounds it. Because I'll sit down with teams and I'll say, look, are you getting everything you need to be able to do great work? Not really. We just kind of take whatever the clients give us. Do you have enough time? Are you pushing back on that? Well, no, they always cut it in half. Okay, so are you involved in all the meetings you need to be? It's like, well, no, they don't really invite us to that. It's like, yep, it's a freaking mystery why the work's not better. But this is the thing, is that what we need to do is to really look at and understand these relationships. So again, as Nick showed this morning, and I will continue with here today, obviously creative directors are a big fan of explaining things with dots. It's the same reason why we all wear black and jeans and big glasses. I don't understand it. But so we have a design team and we have the company. In the simplest terms, let's look at the 4 possible relationships that exist between these two things. The first one is that design is an external resource. This is historically the agency model, that the design team sits outside of the company. You have another one, which is design that's just really sort of as part of the organization. And the difference between those two really highlights the difference between agencies and in-house. Agencies are external, which is often why they're viewed as thought leaders, because they're viewed as not being biased. But at the same time, most in-house teams, even if companies will value design, the challenge is that design is not necessarily the output of that company. So you're just simply one of many pieces that's inside of that company. You can have design as the core of an organization. A lot of the companies that we want to fetishize, a lot of the ones that we really like, put design at the center of things. And we're going to also define what design means. And lastly, we have design as an integral part of the organization. Think about the Apples, the Nikes, the things like that. This is the model that they have. So this is the landscape that we have. External, part, core, and internal. These are our options. Take a quick second and just mentally think about, of these 4, where does your team fall? Just off the top of your head, where are you in this continuum? Because the challenge is going to be which one of these you are makes a massive, massive difference to how empowered your team is. Because what you're going to find is that the 2 on the left, where it's external and part of the company, tend to be more of a service provider model. They'll have titles like creative services. They'll have things like that. But that's really more of a service provider. The ones where they're at the core or they're an integral part of the company, those are seen as strategic partners. This basic perception is the foundation of how you start to figure out how do you empower your design team. Because let me show this divide a slightly different way. The 2 on the left are often seen as a commodity, meaning that what they come to you for is your ability to deliver, to hit a deadline. That is not viewed as a critical asset. It is a commodity that can be laid off. It is a commodity that can be priced, replaced with an agency, done a lot of things. You're not seen as a strategic partner. That is a massive, massive problem, and the foundation of if you want to empower your team, how do you get to the other 2 categories? Because when we talk about an empowered critical asset, this is design as the heart of the organization. And that this, again, is a 2-way street. This doesn't just simply mean design is not a world unto itself. I'm not naive. You don't just go back and snap your fingers and it's like, hey, we have a totally different organization now. That's not the way that this works. But what you need to do is to understand where you sit to start to understand what the value of your team is and the perceived value to the company. So one of the things that I'll also do as I go through here, I've got 45 minutes. This is about a day's worth of stuff to talk about. So occasionally I'm going to put up episodes of my podcast. I make no money on any of my podcasts. I have no advertisers. I ask for no money. It is just simply up here because this is then going to be, as we look at how to be a successful client-side creative, that is a 45-minute exploration about what I just talked about. So in a couple cases, I'm going to put that up there. Also in the link that I had up in there at the beginning, there are links to all these shows, trying to make it much easier. But the other thing you'll find is that your team's value is often defined by an internal perception that you may not really be clear about. And what that is it's looking at understanding the value of creativity versus design. And whenever I talk to a lot of people, the thing that they're going to tell me is that they think these 2 things are actually the exact same thing. I would argue very differently. Because I think that in the era that we live in, they are absolutely interconnected, but they are different. And so the thing that you are going to see is that creativity is much more about how do we solve a problem. If your team is seen about being creative, if that is something that you can bring to the company, that again puts you back in the critical asset category. But the challenge that I see is that too many times teams lead with design. And the challenge why I think that you have here is because design is a visual expression of thinking. And so that, again, if you're basing the value of your team in a visual expression of someone else's thinking, again, you're looking at how do you commoditize yourself. So it's understanding that, like whenever I built the team at Citi, first design team, 210-year history, the value of our team was in creativity. The reason why is because when you think about it, creativity is something that is available to everyone. Go up and ask anybody and say, are you creative? Yes. Are you a designer? Hell no. And that's the divide that you want. Because again, as soon as your clients get like Sketch or something, you're screwed. Or they start sending you like mock-ups in PowerPoint, my all-time favorite. Oh, it's like, kill me now. But this is the difference, right? Is because what I need to also look at is what is the accessibility into my team? Because the other thing that has gone on that we've seen this as a shift is that right now, every company sees the value in creativity. They see the value in problem solving. This is why you see the resurgence in design thinking, which I personally find to be comical. This was something that was invented in the 1950s and is the basic construct of putting your consumers at the center of your work. How is this new? The fact that we are getting too caught up in the execution is a real problem. The problem with the design is that very few companies see the actual value in design. So if you are leading and saying that our value is design is debatable. How many, I mean, come on, like I've had 9 million arguments over like button color. Right, why? It's a button. Doesn't matter what color it is. If it's not converting, your freaking logic is probably screwed up. But that's the thing, is that in a lot of cases, the ability to talk about creativity, to have something that is inclusive, really becomes what's important, because there has been a shift in this industry, and especially for in-house teams. Because what it used to be, creativity was the domain of just the creatives. It was something that very few people understood. We would go off and like put on a beret and do like a watercolor of our spirit animal and do this thing and say like, this is really mysterious and you don't understand it. And then we would come back with a solution. We'd present it and it would rain like champagne and puppies and everybody would love it. Not the way it works. This is why agencies are dying, because they cannot figure out how to transition this model. Nick this morning is one of the few who's enlightened enough to recognize that this change is happening. Because what we have gotten to is an inclusive process. We needed to have this process become inclusive. One is because if you're an in-house design team, your work is really dictated, and its success is dictated by the support that you have. The other part is that creativity has gotten a lot more complicated. It used to be 15 years, 20 years ago, it was just about making it pretty. Do a paste-up key, made it so much simpler. Now, so much more is involved. So again, the ability to bring everybody to the table is inclusive and much more powerful. But this is the thing, is that if you understand the value of your team and how to position it correctly, that is the foundation for starting to empower your team. If you are on the side that is more of a commodity, you need to start to look at how do you make that shift? How do you better define how your team is going to be successful? And we're going to talk about that more in a minute. The other thing I try to do, just to sum all this up, is to just do a couple of simple takeaways to be able to kind of sum up this section. Now, the first one is that, look, you have to understand and control what surrounds your group so that they are valued, because that's the problem with an in-house team, is that doing great work is rarely ever enough. It's the ability to control, to strategize, to see the politics, the hard lines of power, the soft lines of power, the things like that, to put yourself in a position so that great work can go out the door. The other thing for this is that building value, honestly, I always have felt like the two things that you need to figure out how do you deliver are trust and confidence. Because here again, at the end of the day, the work alone is not enough. What it is going to come down to is that, do my clients trust me? Are they going to be willing to let me take a risk? Do they have confidence in what it is I'm going to do? I've always said in my career, I always want to be described as crazy but not stupid, because I will go out and do those things. Because the other part of this is that if you focus on trust and confidence, it's a hard road to go down. But when you start to make this change, people will initially start to vilify you as being crazy. You're doing things differently. You want to shift the design team. You want to empower them. You want to do all these other things. Why is this? Because comfort is the frickin' enemy of greatness. Because people will do what they understand, even if it is to their detriment. Even if it is to the detriment of their consumers, because it's comfortable. We understand it. We know that it works. But the thing that you'll find is if you're willing to disrupt that, if you're willing to show them a different way, if you're willing to go out and run up that hill, to be the first person to get shot, to show them that it can be done differently, and the key there is shot, not killed, shot. But the ability to do that in that sort of like Braveheart moment, those same people that vilified you for being crazy will be the ones that after a little bit of success will seek you out for that exact same reason. Because they do not have the courage and they do not have the ability to get over where they're at, and they need someone who can empower them to do that. This is why design is an agent for change. We are comfortable being uncomfortable. We're used to jumping off the cliff, building our wings on the way down, and assuming that we will not Wile E. Coyote into the bottom whenever we get there. Almost all the other part of the organization that surrounds you are completely petrified of this. This is why design thinking, agile methodologies, scares the hell out of them. But let's talk about creativity. This is obviously what our stock and trade is. How do you actually improve creativity? How can you summon it on demand? How can you get your teams to be better at it? And so my thing has always really been, the first part of it is, do you define what you need to be successful? I mentioned this before, where so many teams will just simply say, oh, we don't have enough time, we don't have the right assets, we don't have a lot of these sort of things, and then somehow it is a mystery why the work is not better. You need to define what you are, and you need to define what you're not. You need to make sure that you're doing this in a number of different ways. And that here again, because what you have when you're an in-house team, you have your ability to do your best work. You have a huge amount of junk that gets in the way of doing that, and then you have you on the other side of it. Your politics, clients, bosses, executives, the fabulous executive hysteria, which means someone in the C-suite said, we need a t-shirt, so everyone runs around like minions with their head cut off because it's like, oh my God, we need a t-shirt. Did anybody stop to ask why we need a t-shirt? Of course not. They just said we need a t-shirt, somebody give me a t-shirt. Come on. Shouldn't be this hard. But that's the thing, is that all the stuff that's in the way, your clients, your partners, your company, it could even be your own team, gets in the way of you doing your best work. And that's the problem with in-house, is that that gap is so much bigger, because when you're an agency, you are coming in, you are valued for doing things differently. You're respected for doing things differently. You also have the ability to punish them whenever they make dumb decisions with billing. But this is the thing, is that so many creative teams that I see, they have the talent to be successful, but without a process, they can't capitalize on it. And look, I get it. To change this, you have to focus on what is, obviously, for all of us in this room, the sexiest thing possible. We're designers. We love to design. We love to come up with solutions. So, of course, the thing that we want to focus on is process. I mean, it's like just shave with a weed eater, right? Like, it's just going to get any worse than having to focus on this. But the challenge is, and the reason why I go to this, is because this gives you the ability to define what is success, define the start and the end of a project. And so in process, there are really three types of process: internal, external, and obviously creative. But as we talk about an internal process, and this is an internal creative methodology, this is what is going to set the bar and the quality for your team. This is incredibly important that you define what is it that you expect. Because here again, too often good gets sold. It's like, what is it? Ah, it's good. The client will sign off on it, it's good. It's like McDonald's is good. Like, this is my life's work. I'm not here for good. And that's the thing, is that your methodology, like I said before, it has to be inclusive to be successful. Because what I want to do whenever it is inclusive, I want to take advantage of a basic human psychology, and I study psychology a lot. And what it is that whenever I have an inclusive creative process, we'll take the team that always gets vilified. Take legal. Everybody hates legal. Also, there's a safe room I can say that because I'm pretty sure nobody from legal is in here. Woohoo! Okay, lawyer jokes. No, but this is the thing, is that everybody always vilifies legal, but if you actually step back and you look at this process, what you see is that most of the time we go through, we do a brief, we do the project, we design the whole thing, we're ready to launch it, then we go to legal. Great, so I've now put them in a position where either they can say yes or no, and that's basically it. Of course they're the bad guy. If I bring them in the beginning, if I make this more inclusive, what happens instead is that I can take advantage of the basic human psychology that people will support what they're a part of. If I put them all in a train, send that train down the road, people don't want to jump off a train they're already on. It doesn't make any sense. But now they're invested in the process, which means they're going to be much more likely to actually support it and be a part of it. This is why, for me, like, design thinking for me is the greatest Trojan horse for change that there is. Because again, I can bring everybody to the table, I can put them all on the same page, but the other thing that it does is it empowers my team. So again, as we go back to the design and creativity, design tends to be exclusive, creativity tends to be inclusive. The problem is that most of the time, teams will put design thinking as an entrance into design. That's also the worst part about design thinking, is the name. You don't have to be a designer to do design thinking. All it is it teaches you empathy. So if you shift it over to make it more inclusive and say, look, this is about creativity and empathy, now all of a sudden everybody wants to plug into it. Now all of a sudden everybody wants to be a part of it. That's why I was able to launch it as 300,000 people at Citi, a bank, who now embraced and design thinking, because the entrance into it was something that everybody can see value in. So again, your ability to make creativity accessible, because like I said, everybody's creative. Walk into any kindergarten. Say, who's a Spider-Man? Who's a plumber? Who's a pirate? Who's whatever? Hands go up and they say yes to everything. What happens if you think about it is that our society, our education system, our jobs, and ourselves put limits on that, where we say, oh, no, that's not for me anymore, I can't do that. This is part of my job, I'm not supposed to do that. There's a time whenever, as kids, we all were able to do this. Design thinking just gives you form and shape to be able to get back to that and make it safe to be able to do it. Here again, I've done 4 episodes on, so literally, I'm a IDEO-trained design thinking instructor. There are 3 whole episodes about all of that, and then the episode I just did was about actually the value of design thinking and how do you place it inside of an organization. Way more about that. Your external process. This is the simple one. Define how are you going to work with your clients and your partners. Do you do this? Do you actually define what it is that you need to be successful, to do your best work? Do you even know that? But you need to go through and you need to be able to define it. If you don't set your team up for success, how are they going to be successful? And this is your creative brief, your project calendar, your design reviews, your tech delivery standards, a lot of this sort of stuff. Again, it's not sexy, but this is what allows those moments of greatness, those moments of true creativity to really happen. And that's incredibly important. Again, whole other episode just based on how do you work with clients. But here's the thing, is that a lot of it also boils down to our creative process, and do we really understand that? One of the most interesting things that I ask during an interview is I'll ask somebody, I'll say, can you tell me how you have an idea? Like, what are the actual steps that you go through? It is mostly crickets and tumbleweeds whenever I ask that question. And that's a massive problem. Like, one of the things I've done over the course of my career is to work on how do I have an idea? Do I actually even understand that? But how do you make your teams more creative? And there's a couple things that I've done, especially for in-house, that I think work really well. One of them is to make sure, as simple as it sounds, that you start with a problem. We talked about this before whenever we said, do I just get solutions that I'm asked to color in? So often what I see whenever I've gotten to Citi, Starwood, other places like that, is I get this. I don't get a problem to be solved, I get a solution to be vetted. I get a product person, I get a client, I get something else who shows up with that dreaded PowerPoint wireframe, a sketch, an idea, something their child, their wife, or their dog came up with. You all just thought of somebody whenever I said that. And that is suddenly now what we need to go do. That's the idea. It's bullshit. This is why, again, on design thinking, why I like it so much is because it forces you to look at a problem from multiple perspectives. Because here again, as you go back to human psychology, the thing that you see is that we all do this thing, your clients especially. Whenever you're posed with a problem that you need to solve, it creates this tension in your brain. And that tension creates anxiety. So as soon as you come up with the first idea that will alleviate that anxiety, you feel great. You get this dopamine hit. There's a solution. I get to keep my job. I get to keep my house, my car, my kids keep going to school, whatever it is. But the problem is that that also blinds you. Because now all of a sudden you don't continue to push past that to find original new ideas. What you do is it's like 1A, 1B, 1C. You just start to push the idea around a little bit. So here again, to make sure that you understand your process enough to understand that you're coming up with holistically different things. One of the other things that you have to realize is that especially in organizations of any size or scale, you're very rarely able to get all your ideas done at once. It just doesn't happen. So the thing that you need to do is that what I'll do is what I call North Star thinking, which is what I'm going to say is like, okay, here's the ultimate idea that I want to get to. This is the big picture where I want to end up. But, as I've seen at certain companies I work with, they'll come back and one of our partners will say, like, that's great, it's going to take 4 years to build. The pyramids took less time. How does this idea take 4 years to build? But so what I'll do is I'll actually start to think about this to say, okay, look, I've got where I want to end up. What can I do in the near future? So if the ultimate concept is 4 years away, 2 years away, what can I do in 1 year, and then what can I do today? Because this is also the other problem whenever you start to introduce agile methodologies, whenever you start to introduce a lot of other things into internal companies, is that your executives still have this great anxiety in the fact that they don't actually trust your team. This is why I love it. It's like, we're agile, but I have to approve everything before it goes out the door. We're agile, but we're still on a release schedule. You're not agile. That's not what that means. It means you actually have to trust people. Like, that's like, you know what the secret sauce of Apple is? You want to know the really big insight in here that nobody seems to understand? They actually assume that their people know what they are doing for a living. It's amazing. They actually trust them and say, look, we hired you, you're a smart person, go do that. They are an organization that pushes that authority down through the organization as opposed to most, which push information up. Information up organizations are death to creatives. They don't work. So again, whole nother episode just to look at how do you find insights and inspiration. But then here's the other thing, and I said this before, put your customers at the center of the work that you do. Design is very, very debatable. It's too often an opinion, what I think versus what you think. One layout versus another layout, one color versus another one. What isn't debatable are consumer opinions. Because that's really the thing in all this, is as we look at creativity and design, if the customer is not surrounding this, you're doing it wrong. Because there's a cold reality. At the end of the day, you're going to launch whatever the work is. That lands in front of your consumer. They do not understand 2.0. They do not understand where things are going. What they understand is the reality of what is in front of them. And so all the ways that we all tend to rationalize why something could be less than what it should have been is a real problem. But this is the other thing, is that research and data don't have to detract from creativity. We're in an era right now where too many companies go data blind. The consumer said we have to do this. We've done co-creation. This is what they've told us we have to do. The statistics and the numbers tell us this is what it is. That is a great way to just completely lose your competitive advantage. Because if all you're doing is building what people want, you're not going to really find any differentiation. This is why you see multiple companies in the same industry will launch the exact same thing at the exact same time, because they both all just looked at the data. You have to be able to interpret this. But what you can actually do, like what we would do whenever I was at Citi, is we said, look, we have a huge problem. Design is a new thing. So every Thursday, we're going to test. Every Thursday, we're going to put work in front of consumers. So if there's a debate between me and a product person, if there's a debate between anybody else about what it is we're doing, we're going to remove that debate completely by putting it in front of a consumer. Great, we can settle the problem, move on. So again, using this sort of technique can be incredibly powerful to help really empower your team. And the last one for me is always a big one, but I think, again, runs counter to what most companies do. You have to fail faster. You have to fail bigger, but fail smarter. Failing doesn't make you a failure. Too many people get this wrong. Whenever you think about it from a creative standpoint or from a company standpoint, failing is actually a good thing. The problem is you are only a failure if you don't learn from it. Here again, this is why methodologies like design thinking or things like this work really well, because what they do is that they allow you, in a really simple way, Post-it notes, paper, drawings, sketches, whatever it is, put it in front of a consumer, see if it works. Do it quickly. And what we need to do is whenever we're doing this, we need to really get into this idea of how do we build to think, not build to launch. And so again, the ability to prototype, to do a lot of these sort of things, allows us to really test out our ideas to see if they really work. So a couple takeaways here. It isn't sexy, I understand that. But a clear and strong process will let creativity on your team flourish because it allows them to actually do their best work. It gives them what it is that they need. If, again, you're not setting the foundation to do this correctly, you're not going to set up your team to be as successful as it should be. And like I said before, don't go data blind. We are all creative people. We are all smart people. You have to balance on the one side that, no, don't just follow the data blindly. But on the other hand, I'm sorry, don't be so arrogant as to think that you're your audience. You're not. You can go out, you can try to build as much empathy as you can, but find the balance between the two, because again, Henry Ford's famous quote, everybody loves to use it, if he would have asked people what they wanted whenever he was building the car, he'd have given them a faster horse. This is one of the things as we talk about innovation that really comes into this. But this is the biggest one when I talk about failure. If you and your team and your company are not prepared to fail, I don't care what you do, you are never going to do anything innovative. It is the truth. The other hard part of that is to do, whenever you really want to do innovation and use that word like you know what it means, the thing is that whenever you start a project, you may not know where you're going to end up. It terrifies people. But if you aren't willing to embrace this, especially inside of your own teams, if everything is safe and small, you're not going to do anything original. So the last one is to talk about culture. And look, the thing that I always ask people is, is the culture on your team, is it created by default or by design? Because the problem is, in far too many cases, it's created by default, which means that whatever people do, the way they act, that's the way our culture is. But this is the thing, is that culture is what's going to merge a lot of very separate opinions into one group and have that really work. Your team needs to have their own identity, especially whenever you exist inside of a larger company. You're creatives, you're going to be different. You're not going to be the same way that everybody else is. That's fine and that's great, but let's actually do some things to define this. So how do you create a culture for your team? You have to create what I would define as a set of beliefs. What are the things that we believe in? If somebody stops you in an elevator and says, what, as a design team, what is it that you guys believe in? Can you answer that question? And so what I'll do is that you need to kind of look at what are the deep-seated issues, the deep-seated problems that your team needs to overcome, and especially inside of your company. I'll give you some examples. Like, whenever I was at Citi, these were the 5 buckets that our team focused on. These were the 5 big themes that were the most important to us. Learning, in the fact that, again, we always had to continue to improve ourselves. Collaborate, in the fact that this is an inclusive process. Ideate, in the fact that ideas and creativity were our stock and trade, and that was the most important part. Craft, in the fact that we were not leaving behind the fact that the way we brought those ideas to life still mattered. And finally, lead, which is that my expectation is that everybody on my team is a leader. If they are sitting around waiting for me to be the one to make all the decisions and to lead them, we are going to fail. So again, pushing authority down through the structure. So here's some examples, like creativity is a blue-collar profession. Is for me defining the fact that creativity is hard work. The idea that we've all been sold that creativity is a light bulb is bullshit. That is not the way creativity works, that is the way inspiration works. Please do not get the two confused. Creativity and great work is a lot of really hard work. Other things, Amy referenced this earlier, one of the things, if you know me, is that it is respectful and is confident, it is not delicate. My expectation of my team is that if there is a problem internally or external, you say what that problem is. We're not going to waste 3 weeks dancing around a problem when we just could have addressed it and handled it. So then, how do you actually get that adopted, right? You go through, you write all this stuff down, you feel like you've got the things that are really the problems for your team. How do you get those adopted? And this, to me, is the reason why these beliefs work so well, is that it creates what I will consider a scalable ecosystem. Which means that what I can do is I can take these, and I can take 2 or 3 of them and say, okay, look, as an organization, we had multiple studios all over the world. These are the things that we're going to focus on this year, 2 or 3 things. For an individual studio, so like New York City, you need to focus on 2 or 3 slightly different things. An individual team inside of New York City, you need to focus on 2 or 3 things. And as an individual, these are 2 or 3 of the things that you as an individual need to focus on. What that does, though, is it creates a shared vocabulary across the organization so that everybody understands what the expectation is and everybody is working towards the same end. It's an incredibly important thing to be able to do. But to do this, like I said, is you have to be accountable. Everyone has to be accountable for creating the change that you need. If all you're going to do is to sit around and wait for the person in charge to go back and for them to be the change, your team's not going to do it. Everybody has to step up. It's a hard thing to do, but it's what's got to happen. Because that's the thing, is that leadership comes from a lot of little things. Change comes from a lot of little things. Change is like falling in love. I can't tell you the exact moment I fell in love with my wife. But what it was is a lot of little things that added up to something that is absolutely spectacular. Leadership is the same way. You aren't suddenly a leader just because you did one big grand gesture. That makes you a public speaker. A leader is somebody who goes out and coaches and does a lot of little things consistently. You have to walk your talk. Real easy to say the right thing, real hard to do the right thing. And that's why, again, we are in a time right now where we are in a vacuum of leadership because too many people have watched too many TED Talks and are really good at sounding smart. But in the moments that matter, they can't deliver. That's why this matters. And that this all happens through coaching. Spend the time with your team. Get to know your process. Get to know your people. You have to be able to do that. Set the expectation of everyone on your team is that you have to invest in your people. They're the greatest asset that we have. That's how you want to bring about change, is to get all these people bought in to the vision and the beliefs that you have. So again, a whole episode that I did just talking about coaching. How do you actually coach people to do this? So here are the last couple takeaways before we get to the next part. The first one really is, again, create a culture that changes thinking, not behavior. Because here's the thing that I see so many times, again, as we go through and we talk about walking your talk. What a lot of companies are going to do is that they're just simply going to change the way they behave. We're going to come out, we're going to launch a new ad campaign. We're going to come up with a bunch of new buzzwords. We're going to do a bunch of these things that make us sound really different. We're going to behave different. But the underlying thinking remains the same, which means that nothing actually changes. All you've done is to put a veneer that is going to crack and fade and peel, revealing the same old problem that you've had for forever. So that, again, this is why, like even whenever I instituted design thinking in Citi, the proudest moment that I had of that, I walked into a conference room. And one of the parts of design thinking that you do is that there are these statements that you create that are called how might we statements, which is basically the bridge between research and ideation. And there on the whiteboard, someone had written, "How might we have a great baby shower?" It may seem like it's not much. But what it did was it showed that people saw the value, the transformative value, and were thinking different, to the point that whenever they needed to plan a baby shower, which had nothing to do with work, they still went to that solution. It was still something they saw enough value in that it had changed the way they actually thought about solving problems. But that's why you have to change these sort of things. Change the way that people think, not just the way they behave. And then a lot of it is that these beliefs, they need to be unique. I have the whole list of the ones that I've done on my website. You want to go use it as a starting point, fine. If you want to copy that, you're going to fail. You need to spend the time with your team to understand what are the things that really matter to them. And like I said, invest in coaching. Spend time with your people, invest in them. The worst leaders are the ones that are not leaders, but they're managers. All that they do is they shepherd projects from the beginning to the end, concentrating on deadlines and deferring any of the actual hard decisions, deferring any of the coaching, any of the development, any of the actual parts that creatives want to somebody else, or not do it at all. Because if you want to keep a team together and you want to make them great, one really simple insight, just one. Make sure that everybody on your team knows that the work they do tomorrow is better than the work they did today. And the only way that's going to happen is if you actually go through and do this sort of stuff. So a few last thoughts as we wrap up here. Have patience. This stuff is not going to happen overnight. Your determination is going to have to be stronger than the excuses and everything else that people are going to give you about why this can't be done. It can be done. If I brought design and things like that into a 210-year-old bank, do not come and tell me about how you can't do it in your company. Yes, you can. The other thing, and this is the real simple reality of stuff, I'm very direct. I tend to be very simple about these things. Some people love it, some people hate it. You can come to a conference like this, take a lot of notes, talk to a lot of people, get a lot of business cards, connect with a bunch of people on LinkedIn. Seems great. Monday, you go back to work. What you do then makes the difference, because there's a real simple fork in the road that's going to come out of this. And one of two things is going to happen. Either you are going to go back and you are going to start putting this into practice and you're going to start making changes, or you're going to go back and you're going to start making excuses about why you can't do it. I see people at these conferences. They come up to me. They're all excited. All these questions, all this great stuff. I see them a year later. They're trying to sneak out the back of the room. Because that was the thing. Is your determination strong enough that you will make the changes that you need to on your team and to do what it is you need to do to get it where it needs to go to bring about that change? Or is it just simply easier to make the excuses about why it was too hard, why it was something you couldn't pull off, why it was something that you couldn't do? It's a real simple fork in the road. Don't be the people who just come here and take a bunch of notes and make a bunch of LinkedIn profiles. This industry, your teams, the people you work with need better. We need better. And it's up to everybody in this room to look in the mirror and figure out how do you bring it to life. It's real, real simple. We have the opportunity to make an impact like we have never seen. We have to embrace that and step up to the make the changes side of this equation and to stop with the make the excuses part. This is why for years I refused to talk about design, about in-house design. It was like this pity party. Oh, nobody gets us. Oh, we're so overlooked. Oh my God, oh, it's so bad. Oh, so whatever. That's something that we've imposed on ourselves. We should win. 7 days a week, 365 days a year, we are working with our companies. We're the ones that are on the inside doing this stuff. If we do not beat agencies up and down the street and twice on Sundays, it's on us. And that's the thing. This is why, for me, and the Crazy One as a podcast came out of the fact that I have Here's to the Crazy Ones tattooed on my right arm. Makes a great entrance to a meeting, but it also makes a great reminder of what it is that I need to do every day, because I spent 38 years of my career taking the excuses side of that. No more. For me, it's about changes. Unapologetically getting it done. Unapologetic honesty, because at the end of the day, you may not like what I have to say when I'm honest, but you'll damn sure respect it, and we're damn sure going to get results. So as I say at the end of every one of my podcasts, please take this information. Thank you for the time. And no matter what, stay crazy. 2 quick notes. Wait, you're not coming back up here to do another intro, are you? Okay, I didn't. Amy was like creeping on me and I wasn't sure what to do. Once again, you can download this deck, download all the podcasts, everything else. Just go to my site, stephengates.com/how. Also, for anyone who is so inclined, I am hiring. I currently am looking for 2 design specialists in the United States and 1 in Europe to work on the design transformation team that I'm forming. If you're interested, that is my email. Very simple, stephengates@envisionapp.com, and that we can actually go through and do all of that. So, from there, look, this team that I'm doing, we're also looking for companies to be able to work with. I think if you're an Envision client, put you at the head of the line. If you are not, please reach out to me anyway, because this is something that is now the entire focus of my life, is to help these design teams become more empowered and to help them become more transformational. So if that's something that interests you, again, reach out to me. We'll take a 2-second break here. And now I want to get into what it will actually be the therapy session part of this, which is to do the actual Q&A part of this. So thank you for that, and while everybody comes in and out, you can submit and vote on the questions we're going to talk about right there.